This program is part of my series about love. I'm Glenn Koenig, and I want to say a few words about my racism. I wrote them out ahead of time because I wanted to make sure that I was clear about what I had to say. So that's why I'm holding a script and reading from it right now. I was born and grew up in an all-white town in Connecticut in the 1950s. My parents and my grandparents both held racial and ethnic stereotypes. But I thought all that was just talk. It didn't seem to hurt anybody at the time. We didn't seem privileged. Things just seemed normal. We didn't have a TV until I was 8. We didn't have a daily newspaper. We listened to the news on AM radio, always tuned to the same station, coming out of New York City. As a child, I really didn't understand what was going on. Later on, in my mid-teens, I started to become aware of the racial struggles in this country. But at the time, I thought that was in the South. After all, they had segregation. They had actual signs that said, like the ones you see here, and laws about where to sit on the bus, at the lunch counter, what door you could enter at a hotel. But we didn't have any signs like that where I lived. There were no marches, no riots, so it seemed like things were okay here in New England. It took a long time before I understood that my town didn't just happen to have only white people. Of course, I get it now. It was an invisible, silent conspiracy to let only white people buy a house and live there. It was just how things were done. No one ever talked about it. So there was racism in my town. There was racism in my family. And by then, there was racism in me, and I hadn't even realized it. Now, I didn't create this racism. It was already there, long before I was born. I was surrounded by it, and I was marinating in it. I don't blame myself for having it, but I know I still have it, even now. It's ugly. I don't like it. I don't want it to be in there, but probably at least some of it will still be in me for the rest of my life. I wish I had a magic chalkboard eraser to just wipe it all away. So even though I didn't create racism, I still benefited from it. People of other races were rendered poor and disadvantaged and even threatened and killed, all while I led a normal life. So who's to blame for this? Me? My parents? My grandparents? They've all passed away by now. In a way, it's impossible to figure out who is to blame. Too many people were involved. An entire nation, pretty much. And yet, in my opinion, it doesn't really matter who is to blame. What matters is what I do now. That's what I mean by blame versus responsibility. As far as I'm concerned, blame is almost always useless. When we feel angry, it's very tempting to blame someone else, or even ourselves, for what happened. But sadly, blame doesn't really help anything in the long run. But racism is still present today, and I am still benefiting from it today, and I still retain some of it within me. So now I have a responsibility to do something about it within myself and in the world around me. Responsibility is the ability to respond. It doesn't mean to feel guilty. It doesn't mean to feel ashamed of myself. It means to recognize that even though racism was created long before I was born, it's now time for me to take action to work towards resolving it. We owe it to each other as decent human beings to treat each other with the support and respect and love that we all deserve, no exceptions. Now, clearly, we all have different skills and resources to bring to the table. So by saying all this, I don't mean to imply that you have to do any specific thing. All I can say is that I hope to serve as something of an example, as someone who is now resolved to work on this going forward. For me, that starts with 3 things. First, own the racism I still have within me. I can't see it or feel it most of the time, but it can erupt at any moment without warning. So when a racist thought or feeling comes up inside me, I resolve to stop. Stop to recognize what is going on and take a moment to do what I can to deal with it. Or take time to work on it later, alone or with others or with counseling. I resolve not to express it to anyone who it might hurt if I can help it. It's not their problem to solve. It's mine. Second, I want to learn more about how I can best help others. After all, it's not just up to me alone to decide what to do. I know I have a lot to learn. I know there are plenty of resources out there, articles, videos, and people to talk to in order to better understand how to proceed. Third is to plan to act on what I've learned. It's great to become more informed, but taking action is what counts. But taking action can involve risk. It's easy for me to hesitate, not because I'm lazy, but because I'm afraid of being blamed if I'm misunderstood, or becoming the object of someone else's anger or rage, or even unintentionally hurting someone somehow. All I can say is I'm resolved to act, despite any hesitation that I might have. Now is the time. I say we all have to pitch in as best we can. How can we not only heal these wounds, but in fact work to prevent more pain in the future? That's the challenge for all of us, as I see it.